Yo, what's going on YouTube? It's Richawd back with another video. Now, there's a growing number of people that don't want to be here anymore. Very, very alarmingly. It's a lot of people that they're still alive, they're still walking around, but they gone. They dead. It's a scripture in the Bible that says, when righteousness is in rule, the people rejoice. And when wickedness is in rule, the people mourn. I think it's safe to say that the majority of people are mourning, on this earth. Just little tasks like waking up and going to your 9 to 5 is just so draining and so dreadful. It's very few people that enjoy their life. There's very few people that are genuinely, truly happy with their life. I don't care how much money you got. I see through the cap. I know when somebody is running from something, is escaping from something. I know when someone is taking trips and this, that, and the third because you're running from something. A lot of people are running from home. They're miserable there. They're miserable with their reality. And it's a simple answer at this point. Those of us who have our eyes open and we can see, we know it's a simple answer, and we're trying to tell people what we have to do. But we live in a time where you can't have these conversations with people anymore. People don't want the truth anymore. They've been fed so many lies and been taught to be so angry and so rebellious. You can't even bring logic and reason to these people. You can't be a logical person and just logically state how you feel about things and give facts to back it up, right? Things that you can prove. The misinformation and disinformation agenda is so strong that, you can prove these people wrong and they still will act like you don't know what you're talking about. Or they still won't agree with you, or they'll still gaslight you. This is how we've fallen into a society where a majority of people have that, demonic spirit, that, divination spirit, where they're trying to manipulate the truth. They're trying to manipulate reality. It's clear as day. You tell somebody something, like for instance, look at the Terrence Crawford Canelo fight, right? Terrence Crawford, this is someone, I believe, because of his beliefs and his discipline, he gets shadowed. He gets shadowed in his profession, right? Shadow meaning, he's not getting the shine that he deserves. When you're in the shadow, you're not getting any sunlight. They've shadowed this man for so long because of what he stands for, right? You saw how after he took that victory, he cried tears of joy and gave praises to the Most High God. That's a good man, in my opinion. I don't know the brother, but we don't have many examples like that. And that's why before the fight, I knew he was going to win, because he spoke with so much conviction in his pre-fight interviews, and I just seen how disciplined he was. And I knew he was going to beat Canelo. Canelo, to me, had got full of himself, arrogant, and he thought it would be an easy payday. Crawford got robbed on the, he should have got paid way more for that fight. To me, he should have been the A side of the fight. How you an undefeated fighter and you're not the A side? But their argument is, oh, you haven't fought any high-level fighters, but all the high-level fighters be ducking them. So I do give Canelo credit for fighting him, because all these other dudes been ducking Crawford. And now we see how gifted this brother is, and has been. But my point of even bringing that up is, even with that fight where, in my opinion, Crawford dominated the whole fight, Canelo won a few rounds, but it was obvious that Crawford won. The news comes out that many of the judges up to the 10th round had the fight even. They had it a draw. Anybody who watched the first 9 rounds of that fight knew it wasn't a draw. You can tell that Crawford was controlling the fight. He came out from the jump controlling the fight, bro. So my point of saying all that is, this is the type of trickery I talk about. And then there was people actually defending it, like, oh yeah, the fight was actually closer than people think. You see how they just lie, bro? You see how they just lie right in front of our faces, bro? And then you have idiots that actually believe the propaganda. People like me, people with a mind like me, they can't trick me, but who they're trying to trick is your children, the next generation. That's why things are going to get a lot worse, because they're going to be teaching your children these lies and this deception, and true history is going to be lost. Another thing I don't like, after the Terrence Crawford fight, people can't just give a brother his shine, bro, without having to tear another brother down. Now they got to bring Floyd Mayweather into the equation. Now Floyd catching strays. To me, Floyd is the greatest boxer of our generation and arguably of all time. When it comes to hitting and not getting hit, people say Floyd is a boring fighter. I don't think so. In my opinion, if you think Floyd is a boring fighter, you just don't respect the art of boxing, bro. Because when I watch someone like Floyd fight, it's like you're watching a strategist, you're watching a magician. He's strategic. Every move he's making is strategic. He's strategically doing everything he does to line you up for the kill. And to me, that's entertaining to watch the process of, people call it running, but it's really just, positioning himself in the boxing ring and forcing your opponent to use stamina. Because when you move around in the boxing ring, your opponent has to chase you down. Now they have to exert energy, exert stamina. Right? So Floyd was a genius in the boxing ring. But a lot of people don't want to give Floyd his credit because he was a so-called black man who was confident, boastful, and they hate that. They want you as a black man to be quiet and humble. It's certain people like, oh, yeah, I like Bud better because, he's humble and he's this and that. Why the black man always got to be humble? But y'all love Canelo and y'all love Conor McGregor and all of them. They can be boastful. The people without the darker complexions, they can be boastful, but our people can't be. The racism in this world on all sides, right? Black people racist, white people racist, everybody racist, bro. Everybody racist, bro. In my opinion, bro, I think every culture should just be given their own land and should be able to thrive with their people. I believe in segregation. When you look up in the Bible, we were segregated, right? God's people were together and the others were spread abroad, right? And then we started to spread abroad. You know what I'm saying? But we was always together. We was always separated. We always separated. The elect was always separated from the non-elect. It's always been segregation. Segregation to me isn't a bad thing, But, even me saying something like that will be controversial. Like, just how sensitive people are to the truth is insane, bro. And it's draining, man. It's draining being someone like me who can see and is trying to show people, but they don't want to listen. They don't want to see. They just want to believe what they want to believe. They don't want to listen to me giving y'all gems about what's going on in the world because I don't have the status or I don't have the whatever. But they'll go listen to some idiot feeding them a bunch of lies and take it like it's gold, bro. Take their word like this person is God or something. All these things is just sickening to see, bro. And it makes one not want to be here. It makes one not want to be in a world so negative and so hateful. Like I said, you can't even give someone they shine for one night, bro. For one night, you just can't be like, yeah, man, Crawford was the better fighter that night. There's always got to be some sort of excuses. There's always got to be some sort of trickery. All right, there's always got to be these false narratives being perpetuated. All right. People don't want to live in reality. People don't want to accept reality. And there's a lot of racism going on, A lot of Mexicans, y'all see their racism coming out as Canelo lost. A lot of them were some sore losers, and their racism started to show, right? Y'all see. But I already knew Mexicans was racist when I was around them. When I was around them Mexicans, and not all of them, a majority of my Mexican friends were cool. But I got around certain Mexicans, and I got to see how, a lot of them operate and how a lot of them really think. But the majority of people are racist. Like I said, black people are racist. All right. We saw what happened. I'm not going to keep bringing up that whole situation. But my problem with the whole, that millionaire or whatever who got unalived, I'm not going to say his name for people who think I'm just trying to keep milking that topic. But the problem with that situation, my problem is I don't care about, or I didn't know the person, right? It's not about that. It's just about right or wrong. That's all I said in my video. And people were outraged. People were unsubscribing just because I said the truth, bro. You know, two wrongs don't make it right. You know, unaliving a so-called black person for their political views is wrong. Unaliving a so-called white person for their political views is wrong. You know, and then everybody who's like, oh, this ain't our fight, this is white on white crime. All right, keep that same energy when we have our issues, and white people, they're gonna do the exact same thing. They're gonna be like, this ain't our fight, this ain't our problem. If a white person said that, you will call them racist. Like I said, I just can't with the hypocrisy, bro. You know, people just can't call a spade a spade. They too deep in their emotions, you know. And it's just exhausting to deal with, bro, especially as a content creator, man. Especially as a content creator, just seeing how difficult it is to get people to grasp the truth. You know, how much deflecting and gaslighting people do, because people just lack humility, bro. A lot of people lack just being able to say, I was wrong about something, because they're too prideful, you know. And it says in the Bible, pride cometh before the fall, right? Pride cometh before the fall. But all I'm going to say is, I'm going to get up out of here. You know, just hang in there, bro. If you struggling with just the will to live, and that may sound crazy, but bro, it's a lot of people right now just struggling with the will to live, the will to keep going, the will to keep fighting a fight where it feels like you can't win, but keep fighting anyway. Just keep fighting, bro, to the end, bro. One day this will all be over. But until it's over, bro, we just got to keep fighting, bro. Keep making the best of it, bro. A lot of prosecution is going to come. It's already coming. It's prosecution against the truth, bro. If you're somebody and you know the truth, you're a threat, and they're going to try to tear you down because, like I said, their plans for this next generation is to program them with more lies, and more lies. And there's nothing new under the sun. They've been telling us lies for years. That's how we've gotten to the point we've gotten to, right? It's really the previous generation's fault as to why we've descended so far, you know, or we've descended so low. But now we are where we are, bro, and we just got to adapt through it, man, for real. Have some shit on my list. Yeah, we just got to adapt through it, bro. Like, simply put, man. But this ain't going to be a long video. I just have to get that out, bro. You know, I know it's a lot of people, man. It's really difficult out here. You know, you struggling to find solid friends. It's just hard to find solid people these days. It really is, bro. Majority of people just got certain agendas, and they just got, you know, negative spirits operating within them, bro. And nothing good is going to come around being around a bad apple, bro. So my main message to you is get rid of all the bad apples around you, bro. Because one bad apple can corrupt the whole batch, you know. One bad apple leads to all bad apples, you know. So you just got to separate yourself. You know, the Most High told Noah, depart from them, right? He had to depart from the people before, you know, they were flooded. And he went into his ark, and the people who were going to be saved were saved, right? You got to depart from the people that are no good, and it's the majority of people. I know it's very difficult. You know, certain family members, you got to distance yourself from them because their spirit just not right, right? And you can't trust somebody whose spirit is not right. You never know when they're going to slime you out because they got mad, right? Nowadays, it's valid to do something wrong to somebody because they offended you or because, you know, you don't like them. That's enough to go harm them. You know, you got people out here, they'll do divination. They'll put magic and spells and hexes on people just because they don't like them or just because that person, the relationship may not have went well, right? And I'm just against all that's going on, bro. Like, I'm the type of person, man, you know, if you can't settle it with a conversation and let bygones be bygones, you know, you're really still a child in my eyes, bro. Because only a child doesn't have the IQ and, you know, the cognitive function to just have a conversation and come to a solution. Because like I said, the main reason why people can't have conversations is because people are so prideful, right? You listen to a lot of the debates by that dude who was taken out. You know, a lot of people, he was just telling them the truth, bro. And they couldn't deal with it. You will see the majority of them, they'll get loud, they'll get emotional, very mentally unstable people, you know. And he will be just, you know, calm and staying firm. You very rarely see him get rattled, right? They hate a person like that who has peace, right? Or who seemingly has peace. They're not always rattled. They're not always conflicted, right? They hate a person like that because it's really a spiritual thing. So we're just it's just a time where, you know, if you're alive, if you can see, you realize that you're walking amongst the living dead, bro. Majority of people, they're dead inside, bro. They're fueled off of negativity and trauma and just destruction, you know. So that's just what we're around, bro. And I honestly hate being around it, bro. That's why you know, I'm to myself the majority of the time, bro. You know, God willing, when the day comes, you know, I find me a wife. You know, me and my wife, we just want to be ducked off somewhere, bro. Real talk. I ain't trying to be outside, trying to be seen, trying to show her off. None of that, bro. We finna be ducked off somewhere happy, you know? Like, real talk, bro. Having children and shit. Like, that's the type of nigga I'm finna be, bro, because I ain't trying to be mixing and mingling with y'all niggas, bro. And who the catfish were, bro. But if you one of these demonic, evil, deceiving people, bro, I don't want to be around you, bro. And unfortunately, that's just the majority of people we got these days. Manipulators and deceivers, bro. You know, and I don't got the time or the energy for it. But that's all I got today, man. Peace.